Coming up on The Rundown.
I think that all of us can see that it's coming, over the horizon.
Recreational marijuana is coming, whether it's in the state or nationally.
There's a significant increase in fatal crash drivers in Colorado. This clearly shows what could be coming our way.
We want Montana to write Montana's laws.
We want to get out there and build a system based on Montana values and the things that we hold true.
If you can serve your country, you can die for your country, you should be able to utilize this plant.
Today I am 75 years old, and I'm telling everybody else it isn't as scary as it used to be 60 or 70 years ago.
The Rundown is made possible by the Greater Montana Foundation, encouraging communication on issues, trends, and values of importance to Montanans.
To say that our dispensary here in Libby caters to a different clientele and has to cater in a different way is an understatement.
There are a lot of places to start a story about marijuana in Montana. It's a story that can start in the Montana legislature or a police car, a doctor's office, a local business. But we're starting this story in Libby at Barbie Turner's shop, Alternative Relief.
We're originally from Michigan. We moved here in 2008. We decided to settle in Little Libby, and it's been honestly one of the best decisions we've ever made. So when we first showed up here, we had our own medical cards, and became quickly apparent that there was very few providers, if any. And then we started to learn the history of the W.R. Grace mine and the history of Libby a little bit, and started meeting more people and realized quickly that this isn't a normal environment. These people around here need help and they need access.
Reliant on Turner's jars of medical marijuana, tinctures, and edibles are combat veterans.
The Marine Barb named after me. Marijuana helps kind of tame the beast, so to speak. It keeps aggression down, it keeps me mellow.
Those battling chronic disease.
They say that it's the gateway drug. It's the gateway drug out of hell.
And a significant population of patients dealing with the cancers, lung disease, respiratory illness, and pain that comes with exposure to asbestos.
With those respiratory issues, they can't necessarily smoke cannabis. They have to eat it and use different means.
There's a lot of pain associated with this disease, a lot of lung pain. And some people use the marijuana for pain, some use it for anxiety. I basically use it to sleep. I just do edibles.
For decades, the town of 2,500 grappled with an environmental disaster of unprecedented size. After decades of vermiculite mining coated the town in deadly asbestos, sickening and killing thousands of people.
My father died of it, my mother died of it, 2 uncles died of it, 1 uncle, 1 aunt died of it. My brother-in-law just died of it this spring. His wife died 7 or 8 years ago.
Now, the deadly fiber is gone, the EPA is on its way out after a 15-year cleanup, and Libby is a safe and very welcoming community. But several new cases of asbestos-related disease are still being diagnosed every single month.
I have multiple sclerosis. I've been diagnosed for about 3 years now, but they say that based on my lesions in my brain, I've probably had it for 20 years. That it's pretty likely that I'm going through what I'm going through because of exposure I had as a child here, because I lived right across Sheldon Mountain, which the mine that was mining all that asbestos is near there. My doctor told me that he's had like autoimmune diseases that are supposed to be like a 1 in a million, and he has like 3 patients with it in his practice here in Libby, Montana. So
I think Libby has proven a point. We all have one thing in common. I would say 75% of the people in Libby have either got the disease or have a family member or a neighbor who has got the disease, all right? And we have found a use for marijuana that probably hadn't even been thought of before. And we're trendsetters up here. I mean, and it helps us. It really helps us.
The stress of being diagnosed with an incurable disease and only knowing there's only one way this can go is down. That just alone, to just smoke to ease those feelings.
With nearly 800 registered medical marijuana cardholders in Libby and Lincoln County, there's been a lot of buzz around Turner Shop about what 2020 could do to marijuana in Montana.
I think we fought the biggest battle of our life 20 years ago, but we're still fighting a battle now, and that is for to legalize marijuana.
Recreational offers huge protections. It offers protections for people that are not criminals, and that's the main goal of a recreational law, you know, safe access and making sure that people are not criminalized when they are truly not criminals.
Word is spreading around the state of 2 ballot initiatives brought by 2 different groups that will ask voters to legalize recreational marijuana use in Montana. One is carried by Erica Ciate in Montana Can.
We think it's time to bring our tourists back to Montana. We think we've got the agriculture, talent, and history to be one of the best craft markets in the country. We have one of the oldest medical marijuana programs in the country, so we know what we're doing, and we're ready to offer it to all adults.
The other by a group called New Approach Montana, formerly Coalition 406, working with the National Marijuana Policy Project.
We believe that it's ultimately inevitable that the federal government is going to legalize marijuana, and we'd like to have a Montana solution to legalization rather than take what the feds give us. Marijuana shouldn't be illegal in the first place, and people sure shouldn't be going to jail for it.
Both groups have fundamentally the same goal: legalize recreational marijuana use for adults, tax it between 15% and 20%, and distribute the new revenue to different state programs, predominantly schools. Based on the revenue of legal marijuana states, Washington, Colorado, and Oregon, Peterson estimates the projected tax revenue from recreational sales could rival and replace our state's tax revenue from coal.
If we're collecting, around $20 million a year in marijuana tax revenue at a 15% tax, in 5 years, that's somewhere near $100 million. And so, it's a pretty significant chunk of change. I mean, we're losing, what is it, like $35 million a year from coal revenue or so. And so we can't sustain the services that we're offering in this state if we don't have some new sources of revenue and something that's sustainable.
The groups are competitive. There are differences in their approach and parts of their proposals. Montana Can's initiative would legalize use for adults 18 and up. New Approach Montana would set the age of use at 21.
I think the reality is that people between 18 and 21 use cannabis. I think that without offering it to someone younger than, an adult younger than 21, we lose revenue, and we also encourage a black market to stay here and to thrive and to just sell to that particular age demographic.
Ultimately, both groups agree that there will only be one initiative on the 2020 ballot, not 2.
So you got to bring the largest group of people together and get them to sit down and hack out a solution, a compromise that the most people are going to be able to agree with. And some things aren't going to make some people happy, other things aren't going to make other people happy, but as a whole, we're going to create something that's very palatable, something that's very passable, and not only that, something that the legislature's not going to be inspired to take a hacksaw to after we pass it.
The Montana legislature would be tasked with ironing out the details on public use, testing, where it can be sold, and releasing people incarcerated in Montana for cannabis use and possession.
We want people who are incarcerated for cannabis to be free and to be welcomed back into society and to be able to work in the industry that they love. So we've got expungements in our initiative draft. We have pardons, dismissals.
Marijuana has had a complicated history in Montana. Medical use was legalized by a wide margin of voters in 2004.
tried to make some modifications to it and did at the legislature, and tried to put some sideboards around it.
A few years later, the Montana legislature tightened provider-patient laws and penalties, forcing many dispensaries across the state to shut down, including Turner's in Libby.
At some point we had to consider the needs of our family before, you know, the needs of everybody else, and that was a really hard decision to make, to close for those years.
A court decision eventually loosened legislative laws and dispensaries reopened. State Senator Scott Sales and House Representative Tom Burnett will both term out of the Montana legislature in the next year. Both of the Bozeman Republicans were there to see and vote on it all.
I'm opposed to broad use of marijuana. I respect the voters' initiative a few years back, making it legal for medical purposes, and that was passed by a large majority. So legislatures have to take that into account. That's the voice of the people.
Well, I'm opposed to it, and there's a couple different reasons. First of all, it's still illegal at the federal level, so that puts the state and the federal government at odds with one another. The second thing is we don't have the research, in my opinion, on marijuana to know exactly what the ill effects are on youth.
Now that we're talking possible legalization, as many states are dealing with, I think the polling for that oftentimes gets tangled with the medical justification, and people kind of ball them together or braid them, and so favoritism or favorable polling results to legalization might be a spillover from the idea that it might have some medical benefits for people.
In my opinion, as a lawmaker that knows that our jails are full, and I guess this could be an argument why to legalize marijuana, but I still have reservations that this is the right direction for the state of Montana to go.
This last session, marijuana once again entered the halls of the Capitol as Representative Tom Winter, a Democrat from Missoula, brought forward a bill to legalize recreational marijuana use.
My district and my constituents are on the west part of Reserve Street, if you know it. So it goes out basically western Missoula County, from kind of suburban Missoula out to Huson, which is kind of a small rural town. It's kind of a little microcosm of the whole state out there. It was a Republican district. It voted for President Trump, plus I think 11 or 14. But what I heard, and I was surprised about it, because it's not an issue that was originally very near to my heart, which was second or third issue for them, was cannabis legalization. And I was surprised about that. And so we would go door to door and talk with people. It wasn't just young people who were involved. It wasn't just Democrats. It wasn't just Republicans. It was the background noise to everything. It ended up being very important to me because it was about, one, personal autonomy. If we are not looking at the ways the government interferes unnecessarily in our personal lives and choices on an ongoing basis, we're not doing our jobs as legislators, because we need to have maximum freedom for the people of Montana. That's what they want. And then number two, it's entirely possible that if other states have done it safely, we have a way that represents our community and our values in our state and can do it safely as well and provide an additional revenue stream for the state.
Following a hearing in front of the House Taxation Committee, the bill died, but Winter expected this.
So I brought this legislation to do that and bring information to the people so that they could make their choice. And truthfully, I knew it wasn't going to pass. But that's the thing, you have to, I think there's a legislative aspect to what people do where you bring bills not only to move the ball forward, but also to get information out there. Because there just is not much information in a state of 1 million people about what happens when we legalize cannabis, say.
It is really easy to get into the weeds about marijuana ballot initiatives, laws, and regulation. The point of this story is to take a view of the issue from 30,000 feet. The fundamental arguments for legalizing recreational marijuana use are this: criminal justice reform and keeping people out of prison for low-level, nonviolent drug crimes. Eliminating a black market, regulating marijuana and taxing it like alcohol or cigarettes, generating a whole new source of revenue for the state. And simply personal freedom, allowing adults to make adult decisions and use marijuana for medical or recreational reasons without risking jail time. 11 states have now legalized recreational use across the country, and most states, like Montana, have medical marijuana systems in place. The numbers will likely keep climbing as other states draft their own ballot initiatives in 2020. Mississippi and Idaho will ask voters to legalize medical marijuana, and Arizona, like Montana, will try to move their medical program to legalized recreational.
Recreational marijuana is coming, whether it's in the state or nationally through federal regulation. And so I do think the best thing for Montana would be to have a really solid infrastructure set up before out of state ends up steamrolling everyone.
Tricia Sanders and Taylor Eng run a cannabis consulting business in Missoula. You might remember them from our previous episode about hemp. Now they're back to talk about marijuana.
We're trying everything we can. We absolutely feel like sophisticating the market and educating is absolutely one of the biggest things that we can do. The more sophisticated the market is, the more they can demand high quality products. Whether that be hemp fiber clothing, whether that is quality grown medical marijuana. Across the board, the more we sophisticate the market on hemp, medical cannabis, the properties that it can do for everyone, the more we can take advantage of it as a plant.
As the domino effect of legalization continues, Sanders, Eng, and others following the industry see it as only a matter of time before the federal government acts.
This is the first time in 80 years this industry has ever been open, whether hemp or medical cannabis. This is the first time in 80 years, and that an entire industry has just been legalized and opened up. That hasn't happened before. The last time that happened was the end of the alcohol prohibition. I look at the cannabis industry now just as a whole, as nationwide, as the same thing that happened with the tech boom back in the 90s. This is an industry quite literally finding its place in society.
But increased legalization is not a trend welcomed by everyone.
The more opportunities through various methods that we have to get people impaired, that's not going to equal good outcomes for us going forward, or the average Montanan that's driving to work in the morning and gets hit by somebody who's high on marijuana.
For a long time, Montana led the nation in alcohol-related fatal crashes.
The thing that always bothers me the most about this is, every year, we send the annual report out April, May, and we start having statistics conversations with lots of people and all that. And what gets lost in those statistics is every one of those numbers is a person. Every single one of them. It's a family member that didn't come home. It's an employee that didn't show up the next morning for work. In some cases, it's an employer, and there's a bunch of employees standing around wondering what to do. And that always gets lost in this conversation. It's almost an insidious cancer upon Montana.
Adding any more intoxicating substances to the possible palette for drivers concerns Highway Patrol.
Its impairing effects are significantly different than alcohol, and the way that it makes you feel and what it does to you physiologically, and that all transfers into bad driving behavior. And I have some significant concerns about what we're seeing now, and I really have some significant concerns about what we may see in the future, because the national conversation has sort of drifted towards, marijuana's okay.
For law enforcement in Montana's largest city, roads and crashes are certainly a concern, but so is the strain on already stretched resources currently very busy combating Montana's meth epidemic.
In the law enforcement realm, what we look at is that community safety, and we look at the community impact and what we've seen from those other states. And what I'd like to do is just draw kind of like a parallel with alcohol to set up, to show that there are consequences to everything, and we're already accustomed to that, and with alcohol, there's lots of people who use it legally, they use it responsibly. They're not addicted to it, and it doesn't affect them in their daily lives, and it doesn't affect other members in the community. They're able to use it responsibly, right? But we also have this small percentage of people in our communities who can't or don't or are unable to, or have an addiction or something. And what we have is we have those negative social impacts in our community that often fall into our purview that we have to deal with, and it causes social decay in our community, livability issues, also resources and manpower issues for the police department to deal with those. And that's where we want to kind of bring into light where we've seen in Colorado and some studies and some information out there is that there are some social implications to the legalization of recreational marijuana, to parallel that of alcohol. The black market of marijuana just doesn't go away or any drug for that matter, just doesn't go away just by simply legalizing it, because there's oftentimes taxes involved, there's profit for it, and all of those other reasons. Plus, not all of the states in the union have legalized marijuana, so then does Montana then become a source state?
Woolley wants to make it very clear that as public employees, they will not support or oppose a political issue in the hands of voters. He says if Montana voters legalize marijuana, police will enforce the law as they do others.
But I think that once the voters go to the polls, if there's some legislation that comes through, we just want them to really know what they're asking for in all aspects, right?
Earlier, I told you the arguments for legalized recreational marijuana. There are also plenty of arguments against it. Strain on law enforcement, increased crashes, that any drug use, marijuana included, is immoral, and the concern of exposure to children and the idea that marijuana is a gateway drug to other drug use.
You hear, is it a gateway drug? Absolutely.
Up the road from Billings PD is Rimrock, Montana's largest substance abuse treatment center. I've met with CEO Lynette Kozovich in the past to talk about Montana's mental health care crisis. I called her up to get her opinions on recreational marijuana legalization as someone who works with substance abuse intervention.
I think all around it's a bad idea. What kind of health consequences does it have? And what kind of societal consequences does it have? Would it really pan out that this would be something that we would wish to do? And why? What's the why behind it? I really believe there's a lot of other ways that people can seek out the feeling that you get from marijuana that wouldn't have to do with smoking it or eating it or whatever. And sometimes I'm just not sure people have looked at any other types of alternatives. That is our operational philosophy. It is a gateway drug, and we would recommend abstinence.
In 30 minutes, it's impossible to tell the story of every person in Montana whose life has been in some way impacted, for good or for bad, by marijuana. A poll by the University of Montana released this last spring shows 51% of registered voters in Montana support legalizing recreational use. That number increases significantly amongst younger voters, hovering between 60 and 70% for voters aged 18 to 46. But support plummets in two specific groups: Montanans over the age of 67 and voters who identify as Republicans. Whether you fall into the for, against, or neutral camp is entirely your own decision to make, viewer.
I think that the more we talk to each other, we find that we're on the same page.
Everything just boils down to education, right? Communication and face-to-face interaction are the only two ways that we're going to make it as a Montana community.
I think we're going to have a nice conversation about this and come to a solution that benefits all of us.
Do your homework, make the best informed decision that you possibly can.
This is a controversial and complicated topic, and one that will only continue to draw more attention the closer we get November 3rd, 2020.
It's coming, over the horizon.
The Rundown is made possible by the Greater Montana Foundation, encouraging communication on issues, trends, and values of importance to Montanans.